In this video, we're going to discuss motivation. How do you motivate employees? This really is the million-dollar question. It's the most studied question in organizational behavior. From a managerial perspective, it's important to have motivated employees because you can increase productivity, decrease turnover and absenteeism, all possibly without increasing your wage bill. As an employee, it's also an important question because if you're motivated, you can be happier and more productive in your job. So without further ado, we're going to dive into a number of different theories of motivation. This is a lot of material, so I suggest you review it in your book because we'll only give superficial treatment to each one of these in this video. First, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a psychological theory about how people are motivated. It's not particular to workplace motivation. It's more general. And essentially it states that people will first try to satisfy their most basic needs, their physiological needs, such as those for food, water, warmth, and rest, before moving up towards more kind of intangible needs, such as psychological needs, the need for love, and finally self-actualization, which is achieving one's full potential. There's not a lot of evidence to back up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, although it kind of intuitively makes sense, and also unfortunately it's not very predictive of workplace behavior. Although I like to joke I'd add one more need to Maslow's hierarchy of needs: Wi-Fi. Those of you in Alaska might feel my pain if you live in an area without good Wi-Fi coverage. Second theory of motivation is theory X and theory Y. This is a pretty simple one. Essentially, it's a pair of two theories that essentially managers can either view employees as type X, that means that they dislike work, they're lazy, and they must be coerced, or type Y. And if you view employees as type Y, you believe that they like work, are creative, and seek responsibility. So, of course, the management styles that kind of follow from these two theories are broadly different. If you believe employees are all type X, you probably would be much more dictatorial in your style towards managing workers. If you believe employees do best when they self-manage, you probably would allow them the room to kind of innovate and manage themselves. Once again, this is a historical theory. It has a lot of concepts that are used in the contemporary theories that are widely held to be accurate today, but this particular theory is not typically used. Then there's the two-factor theory. So the two-factor theory distinguishes between good and bad feelings at work, and states that the bad feelings are often caused by what's called hygiene factors. So these kind of niggly little considerations, such as your pay, your hours, just the layout of your cubicle. So you can eliminate these bad feelings, but that doesn't necessarily cause motivation. There's some truth to this theory from personal experience. The thing I hate most about my job is the copy machine. It drives me crazy, but improving the copy machine, getting a new copy machine, wouldn't necessarily motivate me to do my job any better. Motivators tend to be intrinsic factors such as achievement or need for recognition, taking a deep interest in your work, or gaining increased responsibility. Next, there's McClelland's theory of needs. McClelland postulated that there are three main needs that drive workplace behavior: the need for achievement, the need for power, and the need for affiliation. A good manager, according to McClelland, would demonstrate high need for power and high need for affiliation, not necessarily high need for achievement. This might be surprising, but remember, managers are people who achieve their goals through others. Of the theories we've reviewed so far, McClelland had the best empirical support, and and forms a basis for a few of the more contemporary theories that we'll talk about next. Moving on to behavioral theories, reinforcement theory is a powerful idea. If you're familiar with Pavlov's dogs, it's the idea that if someone displays a behavior you want to reinforce, you reinforce it by giving them, in the dog's case, food. In the workplace context, you might give them praise or a financial reward. But on the flip side, there's cognitive evaluation theory, which holds that extrinsic rewards, things like performance motivating pay or too much praise, might actually reduce intrinsic interest in doing the task. You might have experienced this if you ever tried to turn a hobby into a job. This oftentimes applies when extrinsic rewards don't line up with the intrinsic reward of performing a particular task or function. So if you're given a bonus based on some arbitrary target that doesn't really align with the intrinsic motivators or reasons why you do something, those extrinsic rewards actually can be demotivating. Then there's goal setting theory. So goal setting theory basically says that employees will do better or be more productive and motivated when they can set specific and difficult goals, get feedback, and participate in the decision making as to what those goals are. Some other keys to goal setting theory include having explicit time periods or a timeline built into the goals, and having that feedback, as I mentioned. Next, there's equity theory. Equity theory basically states that if a workplace is perceived to be unfair, you won't be motivated to do your job. There are actually three types of justice that kind of fall under this theory that you need to have in place for a workplace to be perceived as fair. Distributive justice, essentially, you perceive what you get from a job, whether that's pay, benefits, other kinds of perks, and you kind of put it in relation to how much effort you have to put forth, and you compare it to what others get, and you decide whether that's fair or not. So is it fair that Cindy got the corner office and you didn't? Does she work harder than you? You put that all into context and decide whether there's distributive justice in a workplace. There's procedural justice, which is simply the perceived fairness of the process to determine those outcomes or how those rewards are distributed. And then there's interactional justice. So are you treated with dignity and respect? Does your manager explain to you why Cindy got the corner office and you didn't in a way that you think respects you? Equity theory is interesting in that a lack of equity can certainly be a demotivating factor, but fairness alone maybe is not a strong motivator in the workplace. Finally, there's expectancy theory, which holds that behavior depends on the strength of an expectation that the act will be followed by a given outcome and on the attractiveness of that outcome. It includes some elements of behavioral theory and some cognitive theories, such as goal setting. So there's really an emphasis on three relationships in expectancy theory. The relationship between the effort you exert on the job and how well you can perform. So if you think no matter how hard you work in this class, you will never get above a C, you may not be very motivated to put in that effort. Then there's the relationship between performance and reward. If you perform, if you achieve high marks in this class, for example, on all your tests, will you be rewarded for that? Will you get an A, and will that A actually be a reward you want? That's the final category, is the relationship between rewards and personal goals. Does the reward, for example, getting an A in this class, actually align with your personal goals? Do you care if you get an A or not? So tying it all together, motivation in the workplace can depend on personal goals, expectations, alignment with organizational goals, extrinsic rewards, and your perception of fairness. In other words, there's a lot that goes into it. Pay is certainly not the only way, nor the best way in many situations, to motivate employees, but it can be a powerful motivator. Try to hire employees with strong alignment between their personal goals and organizational goals. It makes motivating them a lot easier. Create an equitable work environment with clear expectations and goals. Deliver on promises that reinforces behavior, but be careful to reinforce the right behaviors.